Hi, my name is Jack Getz. I own Dogwatch of Grt Pgh. This is my first attempt at a video to post to YouTube, so bear with me. The subject of today's video is wire, and what kind of wire we use for our fencing and why we use that wire. In particular, there have been some claims that stranded versus solid wire, one is better than the other. In reality, there are over 230 Dogwatch dealers internationally using both stranded and solid copper wire. It really seems to come down to a personal choice. I use stranded 14 gauge stranded copper wire, and the purpose of this video today is to just share my reasons for using stranded copper instead of solid copper. So we're going to get started. I'm going to be doing some different things with wire here. All of this wire is 14 gauge wire. Some of it is stranded, some of it is solid. And one of the first reasons I prefer stranded wire, which is this, and before we get started, maybe I should show you the difference between stranded and solid. Solid wire is one, as the word describes, one solid piece of wire, typically inside of a sheath or insulation. So it's a single strand of wire. Stranded wire is several individual strands of wire inside of a sheath, solid and stranded. Some people like the solid, some prefer the stranded. This is what I use. So one of the first the reason I like it is because solid wire has something called set, or I call it memory, which means if I bend this, it's going to stay bent. So if this is laying in a landscaping bed and someone comes along and pulls up a plant or something and happens to catch the wire, then the wire remains like that. Stranded wire, to me, is very relaxed. So if it's laying in the ground and I pick it up like this, it drops back down and pretty much lays flat again. So there's a difference between memory or set and none. The other claims is that solid wire is stronger than stranded and less prone to corrosion. So let's take strength. I always like to refer to John Roebling, who was a German immigrant who designed wire rope. And we live in Butler County, Pennsylvania. Right down the road is Saxonburg, Pennsylvania, and that is where John Roebling invented wire rope. And wire rope was a bunch of individual strands of iron wire wound around a common axis that proves stronger than a heavy single strand. So, as far as wire goes, to me there are a couple of different measures of strength. The first is pure lateral strength, which means what would it take for me to pull this wire until such time as it literally tore apart or broke. As far as underground fencing goes, that rarely is a problem unless you have land sliding away or a tree blows over in a storm and the root ball lifts up and literally tears the wire apart. But it would take a tremendous amount of force. I can tell you just from personal experience trying to break this, I cannot pull it apart and break it. You literally would have to tie it to a machine or the bumper of your car and pull on it to break it that way. More important to me is flexibility. So what I like to demonstrate is, let's just take a piece of solid wire, and what you will find is the one thing about solid wire is if you bend it, it will get brittle and break. I'm going to demonstrate. If I take a pair of pliers and I bend this solid wire once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Yep.
almost 7, the wire has broken in half. If I do that with stranded wire, and I will get rid of some additional insulation here and expose more wire, and I'll just twist it as we do in the field when we do any splicing or anything. And now we'll repeat that exercise. So this is flexing that would occur in the ground, which is probably more common than sheer lateral forces. So what was the other one? 6 going on 7, it broke. Let's try it with stranded. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I heard a couple of strands break. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. We're getting more strands breaking. 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. 35 times before that wire breaks versus 6 or 7. That sounds about 5 times stronger with regard to flex strength. Lastly, well, not lastly, there's 2 more things. One is the corrosion issue. So the argument is that solid copper wire is less prone to corrosion or able to hold up better under corrosive natures if, for instance, the wire were to get nicked. Well, my argument would be this. If I nick this wire like that, there's going to be, first of all, the insulation has been jeopardized. So the copper wire is now exposed to moisture and it will corrode. My argument is that since it is a single strand of wire, this entire wire has now been compromised and the corrosion will start and continue through the wire. With stranded, if the wire is compromised or if the insulation is compromised and the copper wire is exposed to the ground, it will also corrode and eventually will break. However, because this wire is made up of 14 individual strands of wire, the reality is maybe 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, what have you, were nicked, but the others were not. So corrosion will take place in the wires that were nicked, and eventually we'll probably work through the other wires, but these wires, the integrity of these wires has not been affected. So other than not being enclosed in the jacket, they are unaffected by the nick. So in my opinion, stranded again has an advantage there because this wire has been compromised. These wires have, but these have not. So it seems to me this would hold up longer. The last argument in my book for stranded is whenever there is a wire break in the ground, you cannot just pull the wires together and put a splice nut on them. You have to always add wire. So if this wire breaks in the ground, I have to add wire now to effect a repair. What we do in the field is we always tie a stress knot on each end of that splice so that any lateral tension on that wire is on the knot and not on the splice. And then we go ahead and strip and repair. Use a silicone filled wire nut. You can see the silicone on there now, and effect the repair in that manner. It's very easy to do with my hand. Solid copper wire is not as flexible. So if this wire gets cut in the ground and I have to do a stress knot with solid wire, it's very stiff. So for me to try and bend this wire and now to somehow pull that, I can't really pull that. what I would be forced to do is to grab it with a pair of pliers or something in order to pull that, in order to create that same stress knot. And since I had to use pliers to do that, and still not a very tight knot, and then go ahead and do my splicing and wire nut. So very difficult to work with. I'm using pliers on insulation. That's not good. I'm compromising the insulation, where there I can do it by hand and do my splice and put the nut on. And so those are the reasons I prefer stranded copper. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just my personal choice, and I think it has advantages both in workability and in long-term reliability for the customer's fence. Thank you.